Okay. So I think there's a lack of information sharing from very critical adults in young people's lives, parents and teachers primarily, who are not helping people be successful enough in the choices they make when it comes to choosing an entrepreneurship path. So there are industries and sectors that are growing, and there are industries and sectors that are not. And most parents and teachers' views of that information is dated. So they might be very supportive of an idea and even encourage one where the likelihood of your success is lower than if you just put that same energy in a slightly different direction. And that's what I really want to start improving. I think we owe it to young people who are being brave enough to be entrepreneurs to give them better information to say, if you're going to run this hard and take so much risk and put it all on the line to create work for yourself and others, let's at least give you enough information to increase the likelihood of your success. And I think we're failing you. And that's what Anzisha is trying to do, the program I work with. We're not only about supporting young people, we're trying to influence all the people that are supposed to support young people who choose to be entrepreneurs better to do that work well.
So for our listeners who don't know what Anzisha is, do you mind giving them a brief explanation on what Anzisha is and the goal and what you aim to achieve?
Thank you. Yeah. So the Anzisha Prize started over a decade ago. Very simple idea. We were going to find really innovative young African entrepreneurs across the continent, celebrate their stories, and by doing that well and consistently over a really long time, other young people would look at these stories and follow in their footsteps. So it's called the demonstration effect. It's why the Nobel Prize exists for peace or sciences. The idea is that by celebrating someone who brokered peace, right, and giving them the Nobel Prize, you're hoping other young people all over the world are going to go, this is a good thing to do. I'm also going to broker peace in my own way wherever I see it. Or I'm going to go for the Nobel Prize for science or economics because someone has recognized you or recognized excellence, and you can see what that is and you can see yourself in that, right? But there was nothing that was recognizing very young people for excellence in entrepreneurship, right? No one was giving really young people huge amounts of money and saying, good job. It was just celebrating much older examples. So I think it's much more inspiring to see someone in their mid-20s who's been successful, like really close to where you are, than, your attention continuing to aggregate to these big Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. It's not that that's wrong. It's just that it's not helpful enough for enough people to say, I can be like that. So that's why the Anzisha Prize started, right? Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So we did that for a decade, and we've got about 200 really exceptional stories now. And we do a lot of work to promote those stories. And there's clear evidence that in the countries where Anzisha Fellows have been successful and found success, there are other young people following in those footsteps without us doing anything. And that's called the demonstration effect. Okay, so that's really exciting, and we're going to continue doing that for as long as we find the support, which I hope will be forever. But then as you do things, you learn other things, right? So then we started to realize, oh my word, money doesn't trust young people. Like, people with money don't trust young people with it. So how do we influence investors to invest younger? Then we're like, every time we talk to parents, they keep dissuading their kids from being entrepreneurs. They want them to be other things. So we better start talking to parents about helping their kids make better decisions, or not being afraid of the decisions they might make in the world that they're going to find themselves. And then we started to go, if you take most teachers, they're completely ill-equipped to support a 15, 16-year-old who shows entrepreneurship potential to make that kind of career choice. They're actually going to maybe encourage them in other directions. So what can we do to help them? And then if you look finally at the sort of policy space, the worlds of education and entrepreneurship, policy at the levels of government, they're colliding, right? Education is a little bit irrelevant to the market, and entrepreneurship is battling for talent. So they're coming together, these huge sort of icebergs, and we wanted to get both those icebergs to think about to not forget very young entrepreneurs while they collide. And that's the work we do.
I am a young entrepreneur from either Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, or whatever part from the continent. How do I apply for this program?
It's very simple. So every year applications open in about October. So it'll actually open in about 2 or 3 weeks. And you've got a couple of months to apply. Okay. So I think until the end of December. There are a number of ways to apply. You can apply in any one of 4 languages. We promise that it'll be read by a person who is a first language speaker of either English, French, Portuguese, or Arabic. You do have to apply online. There are some partners that we work with who also kind of, I guess, headhunt for talent or tell us about people that are entrepreneurs and so busy with their work that they're not looking up to go, maybe there's this thing called Anzisha I should apply for. So we get about 2,000 applications a year from across the continent, but we also get a few hundred nominations, and those are adults in schools or nonprofits or universities, those sorts of things, who then encourage people or tell us about them. And then we reach out to those young people and say, don't you want to apply? And then support them to do so. So that's how you apply. Oh, sorry, anzishaprize.org.
Anzishaprize.org, everybody. By the way, Anzisha is a Swahili word, yeah?
Yeah, it means to initiate or to
There
start.
you go.
See,
See, you can speak some Swahili.
Well, let's not overdo it.
So we spoke earlier about stories, right? And we spoke about how Nobel Prize celebrates people with the goal of inspiring other people to follow in their footsteps, right? And Anzisha is also trying to do the same thing. And I'm a huge believer in stories and the power of stories, right? And the role that they play in shaping the society and influence generations, right? So in as much as it's good to celebrate individuals who have achieved some things in the areas that they're working, how do we ensure that we are not only telling one side of the story? Right? In as much as we want to inspire a young entrepreneur to do whatever project they have been thinking of doing their whole life, but how do we also show them that there's also a possibility of failure?
It's a great question. I think there's a lot of pressure on programs like ours to do more failure storytelling, right? And I don't think we've done a particularly good job of it publicly. I think most people tell failure stories in trusted spaces, not on open platforms. And I think we have to respect that. So we have a long history of creating spaces for failure stories. So when you come to Anzisha as a fellow, every lunchtime during that 2-week period, someone comes in and tells a failure story. But it's not recorded. It's not public because there's a safety that's required on the part of the person who tells the failure story. Required, I think, for some people to do it authentically, right? Not everyone wants to be recognized for their failures. So I think there's something, you got to create space for failure storytelling, but in a way that doesn't make the person a poster child for failure. And I don't think any of us have got that right yet, because no one wants to be known as the guy who told, or the woman who told the failure story, right? They want to move past that and then be known for having recovered from the failure. They then found success. So I think that's where we're doing a bit better. So we now have this case studies program where we produce case studies for schools, and it positions a dilemma or a challenge that a very young entrepreneur got through, and it allows young people to think about how they would have got through the same thing. It's not a failure story, it's a challenge that you went through. But ultimately, this person has found success later, and I think that's important. One other thing I'll add is I think it's really, really important for young people who start as entrepreneurs to know that that doesn't have to be for life. So we have a couple of examples which I want to start telling the story of really well, where they started as young entrepreneurs, but then they found later success in other kinds of jobs. And the reason they're good at those jobs now is because they were trained as entrepreneurs. So, you know, everyone thinks you have to have corporate experience before you become an entrepreneur. But maybe you can be the best manager of a nonprofit or the best this of that. And in a few years, we'll be able to know that a really good way to train for that later is to have been a very young entrepreneur. There's really important skills you learn. So I think, sorry, there's a long way of saying we do have work to do on failure storytelling. I don't have the answer, but I think it's harder to do than people think because of the safety people require.
And I think most of the times it's like after you become successful, it becomes way easier for you to tell your stories. Well, so unless you know you've made it, you're probably gonna keep it low first.
Yeah, and we've got to respect people for that.